Making predictions. The amount of farmland in the United States since 1990 is shown in the table below. Use a graphing calculator to draw a scattergram. So we have the year 1993, 1995, 1997, 1999, and 2001, 2004. And we have the amount of farmland in millions of acres. 968, 961, 956, 948, 941, and 937. So something to be aware is, when did this start? So the amount of farmland in the United States since 1990 is shown in the table below. So since 1990 therefore means year zero, so we convert it to singular years. Hence the table that you see below has been converted to singular years. So you always want to convert full years to singular years to make it easier to plot. And now notice at the bottom we have a scattergram. You can draw this by hand if you choose to, but otherwise I've gone ahead and drawn it ahead of time to make it look a little more neat. So farmlands in millions of acres is our title there, and we have increasing values, years on the bottom, and millions of acres on the left side. Agreed? So let's try graphing this with a calculator. That way we get some practice on how to use our calculator. So calculator, let's see if this works out well. When we're trying to graph with our calculator then, first thing we've got to realize, we've got to turn on your calculator, very bottom left is your on button. Once you got it on, clear anything that you might have on the screen. And once we do that, yep, gotta go back to the other one. We want to press second mode. Be aware of this specific feature. If you have a hard time getting out of any menu, press second mode, and that'll get you back to this main screen, and you can clear it out afterwards. So if you're stuck on any particular menu, second mode would get you out of it. Agreed? So up next, we want to press the start button. Press the start button right next to your arrow keypad, and that'll bring up this menu. We want to select option number 1 for edit. So let's hit enter for option number 1. And in this case, we have some list labels, so we want to clear them. So in order to clear them, go up to the very top, push clear at the very top of the list, and push down. So notice you have the selected keypads there highlighted on the bottom. And do the same again for the other list. So go to the left side, push up to the top, and clear, or right side depending on where you were at, and push down to clear it out. And there we go. So now go to the y equals, but before we go to the y equals, we want to enter our data, agreed? So before we go to the y equals, enter your data. The L1 is going to be your t values. So where it says L1, we're going to enter 3, and each time you're going to have to hit enter. So 3, 5, enter, 7, enter, 9, enter, etc. Okay, now go to the right to be on the list 2, L2. And I want to enter 968, pardon me, 68, hit enter, 961, 956, yep, 948, and 941, also 937. Let's say I got 948 wrong, so I'll go up to the top and just re-enter it. Or if you hit delete, avoid hitting delete when you're at the top of the list because it'll delete your entire list label and it won't delete anything else. If you hit delete, it gets rid of just that one single value. But then again, you have to enter the rest again. So do be aware of that. Now that we have our data table entered correctly, now we want to go to y equals. So go to y equals. So now we're on y equals. We want to be able to graph this, agreed? Make it look like what we currently have. So in order to graph this, well, we want to go to the top. Go to the very top, on plot 1, hit enter. And if you push down, it shows it highlighted. It shows it darkened. Let me try it again. I'll turn it off by hitting enter and pushing down. There it is. It's unhighlighted. All my plots are off. So if I go to the top again, I'll hit enter. And by the way, if you want, clear any of the y value entries that you might have somewhere on there. But for now, go to the very top, hit enter, push down, and that highlights it. That means it's on. So now we want to go to zoom. According to the bottom, zoom. And we want to do assume stat. We want to assume to the general area. In order to do assume stat, you push number 9 or go down to number 9 and hit enter. So if you hit 9, it automatically does that from the beginning. But I went down to number 9 and hit enter on number 9, or I can just hit the button number 9. And now we can see our scattergram. Scattergram sort of looks like what we have down there on our sketch, except it's more spread out on the sketch than what we have here. That's totally fine though. But we can see that they're visually similar. So now that we can see our scattergram, let's proceed to the next step. Since we can now see on our scattergram, essentially we want to calculate this. So we want to do our calculations. To calculate using our calculators, I'm trying to find the last viewing position. There we go. Okay, to calculate in your calculator, let's get out of this menu. In other words, hit the clear button, and that takes you back to your main screen. So clear button takes you back to your main screen. And now we want to push stats. Once you go to stats, go to your arrow keypad to the right. So stats, arrow keypad, once again, by going to the right. And you'll see at the top, it's the option of calculate. We're going to go to the option of linear regression. That's option number 4. So option number 4. Notice I missed the stats button to show up at the top there, top left. But still push the stat button, then go to the right to be in the calculating option, like I am at the moment, and then push the button number 4. If you push number 4, it gives you a linear regression. If you have a TI-84, it may look slightly different, but still we should be close to the same. TI-83s automatically use L1 and L3 to calculate it. TI-84s, you have it listed as L1 and L2. So TI-83s, L1 and L2 automatically, it doesn't show you, but it's automatically calculated from it. 84s, it tells you that it has L1 and L2. Hit enter, 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 enter for TI-84s until you get an answer. And in my case, I only have to hit enter once, and you should get something similar to what I get. If you get an R and R squared, do not worry about that. That's for statistical purpose. What we care about in this case is the equation, y equals ax plus v. The a value is given and the v value is given. A in this case is the representative of your m, your slope value, which if you notice down at our lower image, we have the equation written out by hand. F equals negative 2.9 t plus 976 roughly. So it's rounding the v value to a whole number. So it's just the a value that we currently got, 2.9, and it's a negative, and the v value, 976 roughly, instead of 975.86. But since we want to try to have a calculator do a little bit more of the work for us, agreed? You'll notice that was the enter for calculating, so we did that already. To copy formula into your equation, or your calculator's equation, we want to go to y equals while it's still available on your screen. Since it's still on my screen and I haven't done anything to it, I'll go to y equals, so push the y equals button. That brings this menu up again. And now we want to have it placed in there. So to get it placed in there, we want to go to the bars button underneath your arrow keypad, right next to your clear button, push the bar button. It looks like this now. And you want to select option number 5. So button number 5 gives you your statistics option. Button number 5, push the 5, gives you statistics, which gives you this menu. And now you want to go to the right twice. So push the right button twice. Once and twice. At the top you'll see highlighted EQ, and below it you see Reg EQ highlighted as well. So you want to hit enter or push the button number 1, depending on which one you prefer to do. I'll push the button number 1, or the enter gives you the same thing. So it copies your formula for you. And now we can see it in our equation, y1. And now if you push the button graph, now you see the line of best fits, similar to what we have in our image down below at the left side. It's the line of best fits. Now from here you can select one of the coordinates or two of the coordinates and calculate an equation by hand, agreed? See other videos for how to calculate it by hand. But for this case we're doing it all on the calculator from now on this portion, or at least this particular question. So continuing on, do notice there are particular buttons I recommend you see. The trace button is very useful. So I highly recommend you use the trace button whenever you have a graph. Agreed? So if you push the trace button, the trace allows you to move along the plots in this case, left or right by pushing the left or right arrow keypads. If I push up or down, it switches to the equation. I'm at equation 1 now. If I had more equations, I continue pushing up or pushing down and it'll switch to the equation that I'm at. But moving left or right arrow buttons on your number keypad there, just moves along the line that you currently have drawn or line of as fits. Once again, if I push up, it just goes back to plot 1. And we can see it says plot 1 or P1 at the top. If I push up again, it goes to Y1. It says Y1 at the top. Your calculator might not necessarily say the equation, but it will still say Y1, whether it's a T83 or 84. Okay. The other particular button I'd like to point out is the second button, second plus the trace button. They're very common, so the trace and the second trace combination are very useful. Especially if you want to calculate stuff like in this case it's asking us to find the F intercept and what does it mean. But before I can calculate anything, let's go to zoom and I'll go to zoom out. Option number 3, since I can't see my axis. I'll hit enter to zoom out. And I'll hit enter again. Once again, that was through going into the zoom feature. And the zoom out option number 3 by pushing 3 or going down to 3 and hitting enter. And once again, I need to hit enter again to be able to zoom out. So there we go. I zoomed out. Notice that my dots have gotten lost on my graph. That's totally fine for now. If I hit the trace button, it allows me to see that I'm at plot 1. I want to be in the equation by pushing up. Push up, please. I'm at the equation Y1. And now if I hit trace, well, I already did, right? It allows me to move left or right by hitting trace. But you have to push up or down to be able to switch. But I also want to calculate. I want to calculate the F intercept, or in other words, the Y intercept. So second trace, notice that trace has on the top written calculate. It means you're selecting the option of calculate. Second trace gives you the option of calculate. And I want to find the X intercept. X intercept is defined as the 0, option number 2. It asks for a left boundary, so meaning before it crosses the X axis, let me move it closer to the X axis. I'll leave it right there. I'll hit enter once to say yes, this is my left boundary. For me, it draws an arrow. Depending on what calculator you have, it'll draw a line. If you have a T83, it'll just draw an arrow. But if you have a T84, it'll draw a line. And I'll move to the right after it crosses the X axis. There we go. I can see my Y values are negative now. So therefore, I'll hit enter once again, and it draws another arrow. In other words, between this arrow and that arrow, I will find my crossing point, my X intercept, in other words. It tries to give me a guess. I want an exact value, so I'll hit enter again. And there it is. Now it actually finds the exact value. So it tells me my 0 is 331.66, or in other words, 332 roughly. We'll come back and rewrite this in our statements over here on the left. But for now, let's continue to find them. So up next, I'll just hit trace again, just regular trace. And I want to make sure I'm at Y1 instead of the plot. I'll push up. And notice I can move left or right on the line. So if I'm on the line now, and I have selected the trace option, I can now select 0. 0 is my x-axis value, right? That means it's my y-intercept. So it should give me my y-intercept of 975, or roughly 976, as we stated in the equation. Okay, so we found the f-intercept, we found the t-intercept. What is the slope and what does it mean? Okay, we'll come back and explain that now. So now in that case, since we now have a fair view of how our calculator works, keep in mind, you can go to the table by hitting second, graph will give you a table, and you can see the values in your table and how they increase. You can push down and continue pushing down to see more values, or push up and continue to see more values going up, even negative values. But in this case, farmland having negative time values would not make sense. But if you do it on the Y, going up, it does not go up. So it just goes up to the 1. It does go down, but it does not go up. It's the X that allows you to move up and down. So there we go. Now back into our questions. So now that we've been able to see it, I'll go back to my graph by hitting my graph button again, and I can see my graph. And you can go back to your zooming feature, going into the zoom middle top button, and option number 9 is the stat view, meaning you are zooming into the area where you have dots or points graphed. I'll get rid of my calculator in this case, since now we're going to define the F-T intercepts. So defining the F and T intercepts, since we've already calculated them in our calculator. The F-intercept, or what we call the Y-intercept, we found it to be at 0. In other words, 1990, we had 976. So in 1990, there were 976 million acres of farmland. That's a lot of farmland, luckily, right? That means we get a lot of food out of them, hopefully. On the other hand, find the T-intercept. T-intercept is the X Intercept, agreed? X Intercept, from calculating it, we noticed that it was at 337. So that's 337 comma 0. 337 is the year, agreed? So that means in the year, if we add 1990 plus 337, you're going to get 2,327. In the year 2327, there will be no farmland in the United States. Ooh, that's terrible, agreed? Keep in mind, we may not exist by then, but your great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren might, right? Or will, ideally, as long as we don't keep abusing the land or the farmland in general. So as long as we have farmland, we can still keep living or sustaining ourselves in planet Earth. So, by the year 337, or in other words, 2327, ideally based on our approximations, there will be no farmland. Once again, we probably are not too worried about it, but we should worry about our kids or future kids, right? So the slope, as we've noticed from our equation down below, f equals negative 2.9t plus 976, the slope is negative 2.9. And it implies that farmland is decreasing at 2.9 million acres per year. 2.9 million acres. Whoa, that's a lot, agreed? Do you have 2.9 million acres all to yourself to live off of? And that's a per year basis, right? Probably not. So be aware of that. We're decreasing farmland quite fast. Predict the amount of farmland for 2020. So 2020 minus 1990 equals 30 years. After 30 years have passed, therefore there are, if you put this into your calculator, so let's try this one out in your calculator. Let's bring back our calculator. And I'll hit trace again. I don't want to be in the plot. I want to actually be in the graph. So I'll push up. And there I am at the y equals. And I want to find out 30 years later by putting x is 30. So 30. Enter. Uh-oh. It gives me an invalid error. So I'll go to quit. No worries. I'll go to the graph. And since I'm zoomed in too close, it won't show it to me. So I'll go to zoom and zoom out. Option number 3, and I'll hit enter and zoom out. Now I might be able to do it. I'll hit trace. I'll push up. That way I'm at the y values. Y equals, or y1 equals at the top. I'll put 30 for the x value. And let's see if it calculates it for me now. Yeah, it does now calculate it for me. So it tells me that the y value is 887.59, or roughly rounded to 889. I should have said 888, right? This is the closest value instead. But we'll keep it there for reference. 888 or 889 will work. So, there are 889 million acres of farmland left in the year 2020. Oh boy, we've reduced a lot of farmland, agreed? Well, where is this farmland going? How are we losing it? Something to keep in mind. Well, we build constructions in farmland areas, right? So we're losing it through construction. We're losing it through over-irrigating it, over-fertilizing it, or just in general bad use of the land, right? Dumping waste or any other sort of material like that. Once again, we have a limited amount of farmland. We may have a hard time farming in the desert, agreed? So, something to keep in mind and try to use, or use the best that we can.